for Dublin Sport. On the ball on Dublin City FM.
Mixed martial arts. No one else talks about it except us.
On the ball.
Dublin City FM.
Hello everybody, Neill Marshall here and welcome to the Mixed Martial Arts segment here on the ball. We'll be joined by Kenny Murphy in just a moment, and after this segment we'll be heading back over to Croke Park to see what's going on in the second half of Dublin versus Donegal with Mick Hanley and Alan Larkin. It's exciting stuff over there, and we have a lot to report on this week in the world of MMA. Exciting stuff from our corner too. We have a TV agreement which will presumably allow more people who have terrestrial television to see UFC through the 3E carrier. We're going to be talking to Ken about that because all details on it haven't really been revealed yet. And of course there was another UFC show last night, perhaps the most cursed and underbought pay-per-view in UFC history. Only time will tell. We'll be talking to Ken about the results of that show and why so many things went wrong. How you doing, Ken?
Good, Neil. How are you?
I'm not too bad. So this 3E deal, I'm just going to read out the press release that was released by 3E, courtesy of the TV3 website. 3E have announced an exciting new broadcast deal with the Ultimate Fighting Championship as part of its 2014 autumn schedule. It means that various UFC fights will be broadcast to a terrestrial audience in Ireland as the popularity of the sport continues to grow. The announcement comes after the UFC Fight Night Dublin event in July became the highest rated sporting event in 3E's history, reaching 600,000 viewers. That's actually pretty incredible. That's late show numbers, Ken, if you didn't know. It really actually is. That marked the first time a UFC event was broadcast to a terrestrial audience in Ireland and featured Dublin's Conor McGregor wowing his hometown audience with a first round win against Brazil's Diego Brandão. This reads like a 6-year-old wrote it. McGregor's next fight is set to take place at the UFC 178 event in Las Vegas on September 27th against American Dustin Poirier. In a build-up to July's UFC Fight Night Dublin event, Gary Cook, exclusive vice president and managing director of UFC Europe and the Middle East and Africa, said the popularity in UFC in Ireland continues to grow at an enormous rate. We are confident that this is only the beginning of things to come out of our sport in Ireland. We're looking forward to seeing more of McGregor and other UFC stars grace the 3 screens in the future, with more details to be announced shortly. Now, most people are looking at the BT schedule and saying, like, besides the next McGregor fight, UFC 178, that nothing besides maybe the odd recap show is going to air on 3E. Do you know anything more about this, or how much of a split they got with? Are they going to get some of the fight night shows, or what's the crack?
Nothing has come out, but it would seem quite likely to me they're going to cherry pick, judging by the wording of the statement. So if you get like a John Jones, Daniel Cormier that there's going to be a lot of interest in, then maybe that will air on BT. Certainly there seems to be some leeway in the BT contract for them to air on free-to-air television, because obviously we had a UFC UK show earlier in the year that aired on Channel 5, and we had the show they referenced there with Conor beating Brandão, which aired on TV over here. So, but I wouldn't expect, nor would I want, the rank and file shows to suddenly start airing on 3. I don't think, for example, Demetrius Johnson against Chris Carriasso is going to be drawing 600,000 Irish people to the television screen on a Saturday night.
Agreed. And something else that didn't draw many viewers, we suspect, is UFC 177. This was supposed to be headlined with the Bantamweight Championship rematch between TJ Dillashaw and Renan Barão, but doom struck the main event when Renan Barão, the day of the weigh-ins, had to pull out of the fight. Very briefly, Ken, what was the excuse that Barão gave?
Well, first of all, when you say doom struck the main event, you don't mean Bus Reid and Ron Simmons. What happened was Renan Barão has a huge weight cut, which was apparently part of the reason he had such a bad fight in the first contest with Dillashaw. He was cutting weight. He says that he had 22 pounds cut in the days leading up to the fight, which is a lot. But it's particularly a lot when you only weigh 135 to begin with. It's about 18% of your body weight. He was in a salt bath. He stood up to get out because he was feeling lightheaded. And the next thing he knew, he was in the hospital. He fell, he hit his head, he was unconscious. And that was that. So he was pulled from the fight. Luckily, they had 145s on the card. They had Joe Soto making his UFC debut, fighting another UFC debut guy. So that was scheduled to be the first fight of the night, and Soto, who's fought in Bellator and other organisations before and has a 15-2 record, was viewed to be the only chance to save the card. It was too late in the day really to cancel it, because obviously if people travelling in from out of town, you're cancelling the show the day of the show. So they went ahead, and that's that really.
Ken, can you mute your television there that you have going on?
I don't have a television, the owner's out, unfortunately.
Oh, it's the noise of the earth.
The noise of the earth, basically.
Okay,
yeah.
no problem. I'm picking it up on my headphones, but that's probably about it. So Joe Soto stepped in. He was going to be on one of the preliminary matches, and he stepped in to face the champion, TJ Dillashaw, at the last minute. And he lasted pretty long, Ken. Briefly, give us a breakdown of the main event, and how did Joe look coming in at such late notice?
Well, I think the thing that you were worried about here for the UFC was that it was going to just end up being kind of a dull decision, because that would make Dillashaw look bad, and in a sense it was heading that direction. There was no doubt that Dillashaw had won all 4 rounds going into the 5th, and he was relatively dominant, but it wasn't even as dominant as his win over Barrera, which was kind of funny in a sense. But in the 5th, he kept headhunting. He was looking for that killer shot. He nailed a high kick to Soto's head. He finished up with ground and pound on the floor. He looked good, and I think it was a tough matchup for him, because Soto is a guy who's a decent fighter with very little name. Dillashaw, obviously, the smaller guys struggle to get knockouts anyway, but also this is a guy who he'd trained with extensively a couple months ago, and in fact had even trained with the week of the fight when Soto came into town. So, it was one of those no wins for Dillashaw, but by getting the finish, I think he really rubber stamped his superstar status. When I say superstar status, as much as a superstar as you can be at 135.
Shayna Baszler, making her UFC debut, the last of the 4 horsewomen to do so, was the other thing of great note, or the only other thing of any note, coming out of this pay-per-view. Unfortunately, it didn't go very well. What happened to Shayna?
I was worried you were going to try and pronounce Beth Correia's name there, Neil, so I'm glad you threw it to me. She came out here, and Beth Correia, for those who don't know, had beaten Jessamine Duke, who's one of the other 4 horsewomen already, and when she did so, she stuck the 4 fingers up to sort of signify the 4 horsewomen, and then put one down, and then so this was her second of the horsewomen. It was Shayna's UFC debut. Shayna looked okay here. In the first round, it was kind of tight, but Baszler got her to the ground a couple of times and probably narrowly edged the round. But just in the second, Correia just started lighting her up with strikes to the body, then the head, body, head, and she would switch back and forth. And I mean, Baszler just had this look on her face like, oh darn. She was just done. And it was one of those where, I was saying to my wife watching it, I'd like it stopped, but she was not in any danger of being kind of knocked to the floor. There wasn't a lot of power coming. It was just kind of, she was just getting beaten up badly, but John McCarthy was looking dead in her eyes, and I think he was waiting for kind of that look of get me out, and eventually it came, and the fight was stopped. But Correia did ask for Rousey after the fight was over.
She's got one more to go through before Rousey.
Well, Marina Shafir isn't even in the UFC and lost. She's now 1-1, so that fight's not going to happen. But Dana White said after the fact that, interestingly, the Kat Zingano was next for Ronda, and not Gina Carano, and that Correia would probably have to have another fight or two to get that fight.
All right,
yeah,
Ken,
but I have to say, go on, sorry.
Just lastly, before we let you go, we're going to open up the phone line now to get our live coverage of the Dublin Donegal game back. How many buys did this show do, and was it the least of all time, would you say?
If people bought ahead of time before the cancellation, maybe not, but I think that people buy day of, so I'm saying that this will be the lowest bought Zuffa era UFC pay-per-view. I'll say about 90,000, 100,000.
Excellent stuff, Ken. I presume you're right. So thanks very much for joining us, Kenny. We'll be talking to you again next week. If you guys want to hear archives of the MMA segment, you can go to www.thisaintfake.com, and of course you can join us here for the live MMA segment on 103.2 FM 4 o'clock or just a few minutes after every Sunday here on the Ball. We're going to go back now to Croke Park, I believe, to join up with Mick Hanley and Alan Larkin right after this.
First for Dublin Sport, on the Ball on Dublin City FM.